Hello and welcome to NTD News Today. Kevin Hogan here. Let's take a look at our top stories. Election bills dead in the Senate after 2 Democrats vote with Republicans against changing the rules. What do the different sides have to say? The Beijing Winter Olympics is right around the corner and a lot of attention is on the games, but in China there is a darker side and it goes beyond the genocide of the Uyghur ethnic minority that has led to diplomatic boycotts. And we hear from the Australian Lawyers Alliance. They say Australia's immigration minister has broad powers and that his recently revoking tennis superstar Novak Djokovic's visa proves it. Efforts to change the Senate filibuster and to pass 2 major voting bills are dead for now. NTD's Jessica Beatty has the details.
Senators Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema joined Republicans Wednesday night to vote down Democrat efforts to get around the filibuster in order to pass 2 major election bills.
Filibuster plays an important role in stabilizing our democracy from the transitory passions of the majority and respecting the input of the minority in the Senate. Eliminating the filibuster would be the easy way out. It wasn't meant to be easy.
Next, Democrats put forward a rules change for a talking filibuster, which would only apply to the voting bills. It would have effectively ended the need for 60 votes to advance the legislation, so Democrats could pass the election bills with a simple majority.
To be clear, minority rights are a vital feature of this chamber. But the Senate was never envisioned to allow an absolute minority party veto.
Although both Manchin and Sinema say they support the voting law changes, they shot down the talking filibuster along with Republicans.
Now the so-called talking filibuster proposal, smoke and mirrors.
Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell says there's really only one question they're dealing with.
Will it take 60 votes to pass massive changes, or a simple majority to ram them through?
Without the filibuster change, Democrats won't be advancing their election bills at this time. President Biden tweeted he's profoundly disappointed, but he's not deterred. The voting bills would have nationalized key aspects of how elections are conducted in the United States, including making voting by mail a permanent option in every state. Another provision would loosen voter identification requirements in states that require voters to verify their ID to cast a ballot. Democrats say the rule disadvantages minorities, while Republicans view voter ID as a keystone of election integrity. Jessica Beatty, NTD News.
President Biden is laying out his administration's priorities for 2022. He was able to pass his infrastructure deal quickly, but other plans have been sidelined. Those include economic packages, national voting laws, and his immigration agenda. All this while inflation poses a political risk to Biden. President Biden said he is satisfied with his team and that there are a few things he's going to do differently moving forward.
Number one, I'm going to get out of this place more often. I'm going to go out and talk to the public. I'm going to do public fora. I'm going to interface with them. I'm going to make the cases what we've already done, why it's important, and what will happen if they support what else I want to do.
Biden said though the pandemic has taken a toll on Americans, he has outperformed expectations in dealing with it. He's also hoping to pass big chunks of his economic package to tackle inflation and the pandemic. He says he believes important parts of his agenda will pass before the midterms.
And the third thing that I'm going to be doing a lot more of is being in a situation where I'm able to I'm going to be deeply involved in these off-year elections.
Though analysts say Biden needs to lower expectations to prevent a disaster for the Democrats in the midterms.
The expectations have hurt Biden. For a long time, we believed incorrectly, bad advice maybe, that the pandemic would be in our rearview mirror at some point, and we'd be able to move back to the very same life that we had before. Well, that's a fairy tale, and we recognize that now. Other problems can be dealt with. Inflation will certainly come down in time, but how fast?
For the first time, a majority of Americans disapprove of Biden's leadership. That's according to an AP-NORC poll. Major issues driving this are the pandemic and harsh inflation. An expert says presidential poll numbers have been lower overall for the past few presidents.
The country is becoming more partisan. The country is becoming more bitter. It's simply harder to get people from across the aisle to approve of your presidency, no matter who you are.
The poll says 43 to 56% of Americans disapprove of Biden's job as president, and only 28% want him to run for re-election. Despite promising words during opening remarks, President Biden faced questions from reporters on whether his promises are increasingly proven to be unrealistic.
Look, I didn't overpromise.
That's President Biden on Wednesday, pressed by reporters on whether he needs to scale down his promises, many of which now seem unrealistic. He insisted,
But I have probably outperformed what anybody thought would happen.
He also accuses Republicans of acting as roadblocks to his success.
I actually like Mitch McConnell. We like one another, but he has one straightforward objective. Make sure that there's nothing I do that makes me look good in his mind, with the public at large.
Despite promising to get big chunks of his Build Back Better plan passed, upon pressed on how, he admits that it'll need to be broken up.
Break the package up, get as much as we can now, and come back and fight for the rest later.
Meanwhile, Biden didn't respond directly when asked if the 2022 election will be legitimate.
The increase in the prospect of being illegitimate is in direct proportion to us not being able to get these reforms passed.
And he cites ending an expensive war in Afghanistan when asked about his administration's competence in the first year.
There is no way to get out of Afghanistan after 20 years easily. And I make no apologies for what I did.
A recent CBS News poll shows 75% of Americans feel the country was doing somewhat or very badly in general. But Biden says he doesn't understand how people could believe the country is not moving in the right direction.
White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki again defended the Biden administration's decision to not release visitor logs from the president's homes in Delaware, where he regularly spends his weekends. Biden has spent more than a quarter of his time as president at 2 Delaware homes. A New York Post reporter asked Psaki at a White House press briefing if the administration would consider releasing the visitor logs. Psaki responded that many presidents visit their homes while in office and that the administration will continue to release visitor logs from the White House. She added that the president goes to Delaware because it's his home and where his son and his former wife are buried. Biden has used his time in Delaware to conduct presidential duties, such as a phone call with Russian President Vladimir Putin from his Wilmington home last month. The CIA has issued an interim finding that most cases of Havana syndrome have not been caused by calculated attacks from Russia or other foreign powers. Havana syndrome is an informal name given to a set of bizarre symptoms that have impacted about 1,000 U.S. officials around the world. They include vertigo, nausea, head pressure, and in some cases, a piercing directional noise. In some cases, the symptoms have been severe enough to force officials to retire. One theory on the cause was some type of directed energy weapon used to collect intelligence or purposely harass U.S. personnel. The CIA's interim report delivered to President Joe Biden says that's unlikely, and most of the cases can be explained by other factors like previously undiagnosed illnesses. There are still a few cases that defy explanation. The task force is honing in on about 24 of them to study further. Jury selection opens in the federal trial for the 3 Minneapolis police officers who joined Derek Chauvin in the fatal restraint of George Floyd. The 3 officers are charged with depriving Floyd of his civil rights. The case against the fired officers revolves around their failure to stop Chauvin from pressing his knee into Floyd's neck as Floyd gasped for air, and that they didn't offer medical care. In December, Chauvin pleaded guilty to a federal charge of violating Floyd's civil rights. Chauvin was convicted this spring of murder and manslaughter charges in Floyd's May 2020 death. He was sentenced to 22.5 years. The trial for the 3 other officers is being held in St. Paul, Minnesota, and is expected to last several weeks. After the federal trial, the 3 officers will face state charges of aiding and abetting murder. An article by NPR alleges that one of the 9 Supreme Court justices attends court hearings virtually because of a maskless colleague. In a joint statement, Justices Neil Gorsuch and Sonia Sotomayor weighed in. They said that a report that claimed Sotomayor had asked Gorsuch to wear a mask surprised them, and that it's false. The justices also said they're warm colleagues and friends. The statement came after allegations of tensions between the two appeared in an article written by NPR's Nina Tottenberg. But the reporter didn't say that Sotomayor asked Gorsuch to wear a mask. She said Chief Justice Roberts, in some form, asked the other justices to mask up because Sotomayor felt unsafe around maskless people. But Roberts denies asking any justice to wear a mask on the bench. In a statement to NTD, NPR said they stand behind Tottenberg's reporting. Ghislaine Maxwell has officially requested a retrial weeks after her conviction on sex trafficking charges. The 60-year-old Briton was found guilty of recruiting underage girls for sexual abuse by the late financier Jeffrey Epstein. She was convicted of 5 out of the 6 counts she faced, but after a verdict, a juror admitted using his childhood experience as a victim of sexual abuse to persuade others to convict Maxwell. Her defense team filed a motion for a new trial last December. Judge Allison Nathan granted it. The prosecution could respond in early February. Last week, Nathan scheduled Maxwell's sentencing for June 28th. Maxwell could still face up to 65 years in prison. Multi-millionaire real estate heir Robert Durst died in prison earlier this month. He was facing trial for second-degree murder in the 1982 death of his first wife. The New York County District Attorney reveals details of the investigation and how law enforcement missed opportunities to charge Durst earlier on.
The Westchester County District Attorney on Wednesday revealed new details about the investigation into the murder of Robert Durst's first wife, Kathleen Durst. Kathleen went missing in New York in 1982, but no charges were filed for almost 40 years. The DA says the initial investigation was guided by Durst's narrative, which later proved to be false.
Following Kathleen's disappearance on January 31st, 1982, Robert Durst made a number of statements to police that were contradicted by other evidence. And yet, the focus of the investigation remained guided by Durst's version of events.
The case didn't progress until Durst was successfully prosecuted for another murder in California. In 2000, Durst killed his friend Susan Berman, who helped him with the murder of his wife in order to keep Berman silent. The DA explains what law enforcement could learn from this case.
In our view, the initial investigation in this case demonstrates the danger of what's known as tunnel vision. Having a theory of a case which is maintained even when there are red flags that should cause those initial theories to be questioned. While the investigation focused on Manhattan initially, that should have changed more quickly as more facts came to light.
Durst was serving a life sentence for murdering Berman when he died at the age of 78 on January 10th this year. He was also the prime suspect in 2 other murders over the past 4 decades.
2 Marines are dead and 17 injured after a military truck overturned near Camp Lejeune in North Carolina on Wednesday. A highway patrol sergeant says the 7-ton vehicle was driving too fast while turning at a highway intersection, causing the truck to roll over on its side. 17 Marines who were riding in the rear of the truck all flew out of the vehicle. 1 was struck by a second military vehicle that was following behind. 2 Marines were pronounced dead at the scene. 15 others were taken by ambulance to a hospital at the base, and 2 were flown by helicopter to a nearby hospital. The 19-year-old driver of the overturned vehicle was charged with 1 count of exceeding a safe speed and 2 counts of misdemeanor death by motor vehicle. On Wednesday, Los Angeles police arrested a suspect in the killing of a UCLA grad student. The arrest comes 1 day after the department announced a reward for information leading to his capture.
On Wednesday, police arrested a suspect related to the death of UCLA grad student Brianna Kupfer, according to LAPD. The suspect, Sean Laval Smith, was taken into police custody. Officials had previously announced a $250,000 reward for information leading to the arrest of the suspect. Smith allegedly stabbed the 24-year-old Kupfer to death while she was working at a luxury furniture store last week.
Brianna, who was born, educated, and was building her career here in Los Angeles, was a rising star in this community, whose ascent was unnecessarily cut short by the actions of a heartless criminal last Thursday.
Authorities reported that on Thursday, January 13th, Smith allegedly entered the store where Kupfer was working. She texted a friend that he gave her a bad vibe, but the friend didn't receive it in time. Kupfer was then attacked and left for dead. only to be found by another customer who called the police.
My own daughter is not that much older than Brianna, and I can only imagine the heartbreak. Please take the time to hug and cherish your family today, as Brianna would have wanted.
LAPD identified the suspect through security camera footage.
It showcases an individual with a distinctive backpack, a male, African-American, 6 foot to 6'5", thin build, with short dreadlocks, wearing a painter-style face covering.
Local police arrested Smith in Pasadena City, Los Angeles County. LAPD confirmed Smith is in custody after he was arrested by Pasadena police.
FBI agents were seen at the home and campaign office of Congressman Henry Cuellar. Photographs shared by local reporters show agents at his residence in Texas removing bags, bins, and at least one computer. In a statement to news outlets, the FBI said they were present in Laredo conducting court-authorized law enforcement activity, adding that they cannot provide further comment on an ongoing investigation. A Cuellar spokesperson says the congressman will fully cooperate in any investigation and that he is committed to ensuring that justice is upheld. The 66-year-old congressman has represented Texas since 2005. The district he represents includes land that touches the U.S.-Mexico border. Cuellar has been a frequent critic of Biden's immigration enforcement policies. A driver of a Tesla on Autopilot is being charged for 2 counts of vehicular manslaughter. While using the Autopilot function in 2019, he ran a red light, slammed into another car, and killed 2 people. 27-year-old Kevin George Aziz Riyad is the first person in the nation to be charged with a felony for misuse of vehicular autopilot. He pleaded not guilty and is free on bail while the case is pending. The family of the 2 people killed is suing Riyad for alleged negligence. In December of 2019, Riyad's Tesla Model S was moving at a high speed when it exited from the freeway and ran a red light in the Los Angeles suburb of Gardena. The car struck a Honda Civic at an intersection, killing 2 people at the scene. Riyad and a woman in the Tesla were hospitalized with non-life-threatening injuries. The victims' families have filed separate lawsuits against both Tesla and Riyad. The NCAA changed its transgender athlete participation policy. The new approach more closely resembles Olympic policy and has different rules for different sports. The rules change was sparked by criticism of transgender student athlete Leah Thomas. Thomas started breaking swimming records after she went from the men's team to the women's team at the University of Pennsylvania. It created an uproar and brought criticism from women's sports advocates and parent organizations. In general, the new policies will follow the national governing bodies for a particular sport. If no national body exists, the NCAA will follow international sports policies. The NCAA says the change will create opportunities for transgender student athletes to compete while balancing fairness for all who compete. Coming up, Mexico's 2021 annualized inflation rate hits 7.36%, the highest in 20 years, and vendors and buyers are feeling the impact on the price of limes.
Secure, the true solution for your digital privacy and security. Secure is a private and secure messaging and email solution hosted in Switzerland, using military-grade encryption and Swiss privacy laws, giving you true privacy. Secure is 100% private and does not collect or sell any of your personal data. Secure's Helix technology connects you securely to our Swiss servers without the need of a VPN, guaranteeing privacy and security for all your communications. Secure Messenger doesn't require your phone number or any personal data that hackers target. Chat by Invites allows you to chat privately and securely with anyone outside of your secure network without the need for others to download Secure. Secure Send offers you a private and secure way to email anyone outside of Secure. You won't find this level of privacy or security on any other email or instant messaging application. Visit secure.com. Regain and protect your privacy today.
Hello, I'm Mike Lindell, CEO of MyPillow. Cancel culture has not only affected myself and MyPillow, but also millions of you out there. My employees and I want to personally thank each and every one of you for all your support. At MyPillow, We have hundreds of products now, including my new slippers, bathrobes, sleepwear, and my new beds. We are offering the best products ever for the best prices ever. For example, we have the standard size MyPillows, regularly $69.98, now only $19.98 with your promo code. Or you can get custom fit with my premium queen size MyPillows, regularly $79.98, now just $29.98. Or my king size, regularly $89.98, now just $34.98. So go to mypillow.com now and use the promo code on your screen or call the 1-800 number below to receive these exclusive offers. Thank you and God bless.
Cybercriminals have another way to try to get into your wallet. On Wednesday, the FBI issued a warning about QR codes. Those are the barcodes consumers scan on their phones to open up a website. They have been used more frequently by businesses during the COVID-19 pandemic. However, feds say hackers are using fake QR codes to send people to malicious sites that can hijack payments and steal personal data. The feds say fraudulent QR codes are relatively easy for scammers to make. They advise people to use app stores on their phones instead of QR codes to download apps. Luxury cars are making record sales while the overall market is still struggling under the chip shortage. Where do they get the chips from? NTD's Evelyn Lee asked an expert for an outlook on 2022.
Rolls-Royce, Bentley, and Porsche. If you're looking to buy one of those, you're more likely to find one than other mainstream brands right now. Luxury cars are experiencing record sales, while overall car production is still suffering under chip shortages. But Alex partner Stan Hirsch says that's only a fraction of the overall car market.
You're talking about in a market that we sold roughly 80 million, a little less than 80 million vehicles last year. Only about 8 or 10 million would really qualify in the premium segment. And the types of brands that you're talking about, less than 1 million vehicles.
Bentley said it was hardly affected by the chip shortage that hit the auto industry, and Porsche's sales were up 11% worldwide. Both are owned by the VW Group. In that particular case, Volkswagen explains it's because of its centralized decision-making. The organization prioritized allocation based on profitability. But other than allocation and the volume of chips needed, Hirsch says there is another reason.
They get higher margins, certainly higher pricing from consumers. And so they are able to find chips on the secondary market more easily.
Experts predict it will remain a bottleneck this year. And Alex Partners says it's not just a shortage of chips. Labor, resin, and steel are all affected. According to Hirsch, in the coming year, manufacturers will pre-order parts way ahead of time to deal with the challenges.
The result of that is a bit less flexibility in terms of engineering changes, in terms of shifting and I guess responding to changes in consumer demands.
Hirsch says although it will take all of this year to get a more normal inventory level, he says 2022 is going to get better. Evelyn Lee, NTD News.
Ford is recalling nearly 200,000 vehicles due to an issue that could cause vehicles to roll away. The automaker says high temperatures and high humidity can cause the brake pedal bumper to separate from the brake pedal. This could lead drivers of some vehicles to accidentally shift out of park and roll away. The issue could also cause the brake lights to stay lit, confusing the drivers of other vehicles. The recall affects the 2014 and 2015 Lincoln MKZ, 2014 and 2015 Ford Fusions, and 2015 Ford Mustangs. Ford says impacted customers can take their cars to dealers to replace the brake pedal and clutch pedal bumpers free of charge. The vehicles must have been sold or registered in 9 southern states, as well as Hawaii. You're soon going to start paying more to wash your clothes. The maker of Tide and Gain laundry detergents, Procter & Gamble, has announced a price hike. They also make Downy fabric softener and Bounce dryer sheets. The company said Wednesday it was raising prices for retail customers by about 8% next month. Procter & Gamble said the move is intended to offset some cost pressures. U.S. consumer prices rose 7% last year. That's the steepest climb in prices in nearly 40 years. Mexico ended 2021 with an annualized inflation rate of 7.36%, the highest in 20 years, and its impact is being felt right down to the high cost of limes. NTD's Andrew Thomas has more.
Central de Abastos in Mexico City is a market that caters to restaurants and other food businesses. Here, vendors and consumers are worried about the price increase of fresh produce, especially the skyrocketing price of limes. For food vendor Daniel Velasquez, the prices have gone up too much.
The price of limes has gone up too much, from 10 to 15 pesos per kilo to 65 pesos. We can't even afford to make lemonade.
The increase of the cost of limes reached 150% last year. The fruits are a staple of Mexican cuisine and are used in almost all everyday dishes. Carlos Gonzalez is the Director of Economic Analysis, Stocks and Currency Exchange for Mexico's Monex brokerage. He explains that the rise in the cost of limes and other produce was due to several factors.
Definitely, it has been the combination of several factors, such as a harvest season that has been shorter than expected, and significant increases in other components, such as fuel and energy products.
From Asia to America, many countries have been hit by inflationary pressures. These issues are associated with the pandemic, the drops in supply, and increases in food and energy prices. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
Boston Celtics center Enes Kanter Freedom has been outspoken in his criticism of human rights abuses in China. He responded to a request to visit China from former NBA star Yao Ming on social media today.
I want to be very clear. I have nothing against Chinese people. My problem is with the cultish Chinese Communist Party and the brutal dictator Xi Jinping. I would like to come to China this summer and see everything with my own eyes. But on this trip, will we be able to visit the Uyghur slave labor camps? Or visit the innocent women being tortured, raped, and abused? Will we get to see how the regime destroys bodies after harvesting their organs so there is no evidence? Or will you show me propaganda only?
Freedom went on to ask if they could visit Taiwan, Tibet, and Hong Kong together, and pointed out how Chinese communist rule, or the threat of it, has adversely affected them. Human Rights Watch held a seminar with Olympic athletes. During the meeting, the group instructed them not to speak out about China's human rights abuses while they're competing at the Beijing Winter Olympics. That's because the athletes won't have much protection while they're inside the communist country. The Beijing Winter Olympics is next month, and according to the U.S. State Department, China is committing genocide against its Uyghur ethnic minority. But athletes are being warned not to draw attention to human rights issues at the Games. The director of an athlete advocacy group explains why.
One of the reasons we came out with a statement last week or earlier this week advising athletes not to speak up, which is absolutely ridiculous that we're telling athletes to be quiet and to leave and to get home. And the reason being is Rule 50, if you go through the rule, it says under the applicable laws of the country. Well, we know the human rights record and the allowance of freedom of expression in China. So there's really not much protection that we believe that's going to be afforded to athletes.
Rule 50 of the Olympic Charter forbids athletes from making any kind of political or religious demonstration at the Games, though some athletes say they should be allowed to speak out on issues that matter to them, be it at the Olympics or elsewhere.
There should be blanket protection for any athletes that speak up at any time about issues of human rights. Athletes don't only enjoy human rights when they're not competing. Athletes don't only enjoy human rights when they're not on the podium. They enjoy human rights at all times. And so, yes, athletes should be protected when they're not on the podium and not on the field of play, but they should be protected when they're in those places as well.
A researcher for Human Rights Watch who focuses on China explains how athletes could be in jeopardy if they don't heed the warning.
And the Chinese laws are very, vague on the crimes they can use to prosecute people's free speech. You can be charged with picking quarrels and provoking trouble. For speaking up, you can be charged for inciting subversion. So there are all kinds of crimes can be leveled for your peaceful, critical comments. And as Sophie mentioned earlier, China's conviction rate is 99%. All those facts are a good indicator of what could happen to athletes if they decide to speak up.
Reuters contacted the International Olympic Committee for comment. The IOC emailed the outlet saying the Olympic body always recognizes and upholds human rights as enshrined in both the fundamental principles of the Olympic Charter and in its code of ethics. The U.S., along with Japan, Britain, and Australia, have staged diplomatic boycotts of the Games. The countries have cited the ruling Communist Party's human rights abuses. The opening ceremony is just over 2 weeks away. The U.S. has staged a diplomatic boycott of the Beijing Winter Olympics, citing the Chinese regime's ongoing genocide against the Uyghur Muslims in China's western Xinjiang region. But now reports are indicating a different persecution is ramping up, more in the interior of China. Anders Kaur, the publisher of the Journal of Political Risk and a human rights advocate, tells us more about the Chinese Communist Party's oppression of the Falun Gong spiritual group.
Well, Dr. Miles Yu, who is a former State Department official, he worked for Pompeo directly on China's strategy under the Trump administration, has argued that there's actually more evidence for genocide of the Falun Gong people than of the Uyghur people. So we really should be thinking about not only a Uyghur genocide, but certainly a Falun Gong genocide, and potentially even a triple genocide of the Tibetans. So this is truly a genocide games that's happening in Beijing right now or coming up, and we need to be really concerned about it.
So what's the solution to this abuse of these religious minorities? I mean, when we look at it, China's on the other side of the world. What can the average American do to make a difference?
Well, the average American, boycotts are one thing of Chinese goods. Another thing is to bring that boycott to a higher level in terms of economic sanctions on China, tariffs on Chinese goods. The tariffs shouldn't just be limited to the United States. We should extend those tariffs. The Europeans should extend those tariffs to their own countries, Japanese, South Koreans, basically all countries that believe and value freedom, liberty, democracy, need to start closing down the Chinese economy until they change their approach to human rights, improve their human rights.
So with the Falun Gong persecution, we've seen independent tribunals, books by David Kilgore, that show even just the brutal harvest, forcibly extracting these organs from these political dissidents and these religious minorities. Is this something that we've ever seen before in history?
I don't think so. I think it is unique to the CCP persecution of the Falun Gong and of other minorities. But it's primarily the Falun Gong who are getting this, in part because they're some of the healthiest people in China in terms of they reject drinking, they reject smoking, and for this reason their organs tend to be healthier than other organs, and and unfortunately that's made them a target of Chinese Communist Party medical professionals, quote unquote.
Surveillance is another one of the ruling Communist Party's methods for suppression. In one case, a city just northwest of Beijing targeted 5 groups, one of which was the Falun Gong, as part of an operation for so-called domestic security. The area's security budget has increased about 5% from 2020 to secure the area ahead of the Olympics. The operation includes over $2.7 million for a video platform designed for over 3,600 new cameras. This is in addition to millions for a big data center project. Coming up, President Biden says Putin will move into Ukraine, but may not want a full-blown war. He warns of serious consequences for Russia if its leader chooses to invade. Find out more in just a minute here on NTD News.
We are being censored. America's news outlets no longer provide the truth. 90% of news outlets in the United States are controlled by 6 corporations. They're not out to tell you the truth of what's happening. They're out to tell you the picture of the world that they represent. The Epoch Times is independent. We're not controlled by any special interest, and we never will be. This is a battle between truth and deceit, a battle between forces that would ensnare this country in ignorance and between a media that wants to present you with the truth. Subscribe today to our digital edition at theepochtimes.com and join the Americans who are seeking truth and tradition. Read The Difference on all your devices. We'd love to have you on board.
The 2022 NTD 8th International Chinese Vocal Competition will be held at the Merkin Hall of Kaufman Music Center in New York City. The competition is honored to have specially invited vocalists with the world-renowned Shen Yun Performing Arts to serve on its panel of judges. The gold award is $10,000. The 2022 8th International Chinese Vocal Competition. For more information, please visit vocal.ntdtv.com.
Navigating a world of economic madness, you need to have the right guide. What did today's decisions mean for your tomorrow? We ask why. What's the alternative? Uncover the deeper reasons and the hidden influences, and highlight the real opportunities for profit. At NTD Business, we connect the dots for you. Good evening. Thanks for joining us. NTD Business. I'm Paul Green. President Biden says Putin will take military actions on Ukraine. He warned of serious consequences for Russia, but indicated that a minor incursion could be treated differently.
I'm not so sure he is certain what he's going to do. My guess is he will move in. He has to do something.
President Biden predicts that Russian leader Vladimir Putin is preparing for a military move on Ukraine. Speaking at a news conference, Biden said he believes Moscow doesn't want a full-blown war, adding the decision will solely be Putin's.
I believe he's calculating what the immediate, the short-term, and the near-term and the long-term consequences of Russia will be. And I don't think he's made up his mind yet.
He said Putin and Russia's economy would pay a serious and dear price for invading Ukraine. But he also suggested that the cost would be lower if Russia opts against launching a full-scale invasion.
Russia will be held accountable if it invades, and it depends on what it does. It's one thing if it's a minor incursion and then we end up having a fight about what to do and not do, etc. But if they actually do what they're capable of doing with the force amassed on the border, it is going to be a disaster for Russia.
Biden later clarified that by small-scale invasion, he was referring to non-military operations like cyber attacks. Satellite imagery has captured Russian troops deployed in 4 locations in western Russia along the Ukrainian border. Russian army pilots on Wednesday also flew new combat helicopters near the border. The aircraft is known as the Ka-52 Alligator. According to Russia's Ministry of Defense, the helicopter's improved battle assault systems allow the military to engage in combat at any time of day and in any weather conditions. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky urged his nation to not panic amid the looming crisis and to respond with reason, not emotion. He also said that Ukraine wants its partners to take more specific action in response to war threats.
We want our partners to be more active, not only verbally. Not only the information of what Russia can do is essential, but it is more important what the world would do. Not theoretical, they will pay the price, but announcing the specific sanctions, specific measures the world is ready to introduce.
During his visit to Ukraine's capital, Kyiv, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken warned that Russia could attack its neighbor at very short notice. He is now in Berlin for talks with allies. In a coming speech, Blinken is expected to send the message that Washington will continue to pursue diplomatic solutions. His meeting with Russian Foreign Minister will follow Friday in Geneva.
England will soon see the end to most of the remaining COVID-19 restrictions. The government is no longer asking people to work from home, and from next Thursday, people won't need to wear face masks or show COVID passes. Prime Minister Boris Johnson said the government will trust people to make their own decisions and signals his intention to treat COVID like the flu. We hear more from NTD's Eddie Aitken.
Prime Minister Boris Johnson announced the end of Plan B measures aimed at tackling the spread of COVID-19 in England. He said on Wednesday this is due to the booster campaign and the public's response to the restrictions.
Today's latest ONS data show clearly that infection levels are falling in England. And while there are some places where cases are likely to continue rising, including in primary schools, our scientists believe it is likely that the Omicron wave has now peaked nationally.
The Prime Minister said that from this week the government will no longer advise people to work from home. And from Thursday next week, mandatory COVID passes will end. Compulsory face masks will be scrapped in classrooms starting this Thursday. And from next week, the government will no longer make people wear them anywhere in England.
In the country at large, we will continue to suggest the use of face coverings in enclosed or crowded spaces, particularly when you come into contact with people you don't normally meet. But we will trust the judgment of the British people and no longer criminalise anyone who chooses not to wear one.
The Prime Minister said the requirement to self-isolate for those who have tested positive will be allowed to lapse when it expires in late March. He said if the data allows, the date could be brought forward.
And there will soon come a time when we can remove the legal requirement to self-isolate altogether, just as we don't place legal obligations on people to isolate if they have flu.
The announcement comes after COVID infection levels fell in most parts of the UK for the first time since early December. The Prime Minister warned that the pandemic is not over.
But to make that possible, we must all remain cautious during these last weeks of winter, when there are still over 16,000 people in hospital in England alone.
The bonfire of COVID regulations could help appease the Prime Minister's critics from his own party, at a time when he is under pressure over Downing Street parties. Eddie Aitken, NTD News.
British Prime Minister Boris Johnson is weathering louder calls to step down after throwing parties while the rest of his country stayed at home. Who will be the country's next Prime Minister? Let's take a look at some of the candidates.
British Prime Minister Boris Johnson is facing growing calls for his resignation, even within his own party. This came after disclosures of lockdown-breaking parties at his official residence. If Johnson does step down, here are 5 likely successors. Finance Minister Rishi Sunak wins the highest approval rating of any potential candidate. Garnering much of that favor, his backing the economic rescue package during the pandemic, which prevented mass unemployment in the country. But support for the former Goldman Sachs banker slipped in recent months. His October tax and spend budget is leading Britain to its biggest tax burden since the 1950s. Foreign Secretary Liz Truss regularly tops party polls conducted by the website Conservative Home. She has a carefully cultivated public image. A photo of her in a tank last year conjures images of Margaret Thatcher, Britain's first female prime minister. Last month, she was appointed as Britain's chief negotiator with the European Union. Former Foreign Minister Jeremy Hunt was second only to Johnson in the 2019 leadership race. He's chaired the Health Select Committee for the past 2 years. In a media interview this week, Hunt said his ambition to become prime minister hasn't completely vanished. Another runner-up, Britain's current health minister, Sajid Javid, came in 4th in the last election. He consistently scored high in party polls. His peers describe him as a decisive and clear-eyed minister. And finally, Deputy Prime Minister Dominic Raab. He served in the government as Foreign Minister and Brexit Secretary. He also stood in as Prime Minister when Johnson was infected early in the pandemic. But he was heavily criticized for staying on vacation during the Taliban takeover of Afghanistan last August, and was therefore demoted to Justice Minister.
A mother in central Greece was sentenced to 7 months in prison. The reason? She's refused to send her child to school since last year. The mother asked to remain anonymous during interviews outside the court. She also has a small child in kindergarten. When asked why she kept the kids at home, she said it was out of fear of them contracting COVID-19. Her sentence was suspended for 3 years, and her 11-year-old is returning to school this week. The Greek government is cracking down on parents who fail to send their kids to school. Under a revised law forcing school attendance, violating parents face fines and up to 2 years in prison. Cases also emerged of parents opposing mask wearing or self-testing at school. Since last December, the Greek government started offering vaccinations to children aged 5 to 12. Anti-vaccine protesters have been demonstrating against the move in recent months. This week, Greece also imposed fines on those aged 60 and over who haven't been vaccinated. Still to come, the Berlin Film Festival announces this year's lineup. 18 films will compete for the Golden Bear at the in-person event next month. Find out more here on NTD News. A spokesperson for the Australian Lawyers Alliance said on Thursday that the decision to cancel tennis superstar Novak Djokovic's visa reveals the broad power Australia's immigration minister wields. NTD's Andrew Thomas reports.
Is it good to be home?
The announcement comes after an Australian court released its reasons for dismissing the player's challenge to his visa cancellation after Immigration Minister Alex Hawke revoked Djokovic's visa for a second time.
In essence, what they've said is that whilst other people and other ministers and someone else in Minister Hawke's shoes might have taken a different view of it, their view was that his decision was within the law.
The federal court said Hawke reasonably believed the star may be a risk to the community. Djokovic is not vaccinated against the CCP virus. Australian lawyer Greg Barnes warned that the case shows that Australian visa holders are vulnerable to ministerial power.
You know, when it comes to visa holders, they are vulnerable to a minister exercising their powers personally. And we see this with refugees, we see with people with criminal records, we see, particularly in the last 10 to 15 years, ministers increasingly using these personal powers to cancel people's visas.
The court also rejected the argument that there was no evidence that Djokovic had ever urged anyone not to get vaccinated, saying it was open to infer that the public would think he opposed vaccinations, since he said he had not been vaccinated.
But you could get a case where a person has particular views about a matter of controversy that the Australian government doesn't like, if that person's opposed to government policy, if they've got a track record of speaking about that issue. A minister could say, well, that person may be or might be a risk to the health, safety and good order of the Australian community.
The world number one was deported from Australia on Sunday night, just hours after the court dismissed his effort to stay in the country, to play at the Australian Open, where he hoped to win a record 21st major title. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
This year's Berlin Film Festival, also known as Berlinale, will return in February with live screenings. And organizers have announced this year's lineup. 18 films will be competing for the Golden Bear. Let's take a look.
The Berlinale will start on February 10th and ends on February 20th. The Golden Bear and the Silver Bear will be handed out at an award ceremony on February 16th. This is usually considered the most political of the major film festivals, but love stories will dominate this year's festival.
Never before we have seen and welcomed so many love stories as this year. Crazy, improbable, unexpected, and intoxicating love, which is, after all, what all encounters are about deep down.
The festival's artistic director says this year's edition would be about restoring social ties sundered by 2 years of isolation. In-person events will return, but there will only be 18 films. That's about 20% less than the numbers shown at the last in-person festival in 2020.
This year selection has been, as always, very exciting, a long journey, but even more challenging than usually. We have decided to go with an in-presence festival because we really believe that the collective experience is at the center of a film festival, or at least at the center of the Berlin Film Festival.
Movies to be shown include director Claire Denis's Both Sides of the Blade, Phyllis Nagy's Call Jane starring Elizabeth Banks, Laurent Lariviere's About Joan, and Peter Flint's Against the Ice. The organizers say they expect the filmmakers and actors to present their works in person.
We didn't receive any cancellation from any guest, including Call Jane, who has Elizabeth Banks as a lead. But we are aware that things might change in 3 weeks' time. We are aware that travels can become more problematic than what they are right now.
All the movie theaters will have a 50% capacity, and all the guests must show either proof of vaccination or a recent negative virus test or proof of recovery from the virus.
On today's health segment, we'll look at 4 habits that could be accelerating cognitive decline. Here's Gina Marie, who brings us Strong Mind and Body.
Welcome to Strong Mind and Body, I'm Gina Marie. By now you might be aware that a sedentary lifestyle and poor diet can hurt brain function and memory. But there is more to brain health than just eating well and being active. There are several lifestyle habits that may be chipping away at brain health and accelerating cognitive decline. However, the good news is that changing just one habit has the potential to change how your brain works to help you age better. It's also never too late to start. Here are 4 habits that could be deteriorating your memory and thinking ability. Let's start by looking at dwelling on the negative. Holding on to grudges, resentment, and ruminating on negative thoughts won't just put you in a bad mood. It's also associated with cognitive decline and memory loss in people 55 and older. You can try to spruce up thinking patterns by writing down things you are grateful for and thinking about them. Next is too many sugary beverages. It might be time to reconsider that big glass of morning OJ. A study from 2017 showed that sugary beverage consumption was linked to higher episodic memory and lower total brain volume. The takeaway is avoid sugary soda and sweet tea and replace your morning fruit drink with some real fibrous fruit and a glass of water. Next, let's consider sleep. Getting high quality sleep is absolutely essential to a productive mind. Sleep scheduling is really important, so going to bed and waking up at consistent times as well as room temperature and brightness all affect how you sleep. You want your bedroom to be slightly on the cool side and as dark as possible. Also, think about your headphones. If something is bad for your ears, it is bad for your brain too. A study of over 600 adults aged 36 to 90 found that mild hearing loss was associated with roughly double the risk of dementia. If others can hear your earbuds or headphones, the sound is up too high. One way to test the volume is to hold your bud or earphone at arm's length. If you can hear it, turn it down. It's also worth to wear foam earplugs to concerts and sporting events. Hearing is extremely precious and you want to look after it at any cost. These are 4 habits that could be accelerating cognitive decline.
Say cheese. Grab your fondue set, order a cheese pizza, or one of America's favorites, mac and cheese, because America is celebrating all things cheesy today. It's National Cheese Lovers Day. We don't know how cheese making started, but according to the National Day calendar, the earliest record of cheesy goodness dates back to 5500 BCE. Cheese has a special place in Americans' hearts and diets. The nutritional value of cheese varies depending on the variety. For example, cottage cheese and mozzarella cheese usually have a lower fat content, while mascarpone and cream cheese pack it on. Today, there are over 1,400 varieties of cheese. Thanks for watching. At NTD, we're honored to be your source for the news. Catch us again tonight at 6:30 Eastern. In New York City, I'm Kevin Hogan.
Thanks for watching us on YouTube. Did you know YouTube only keeps selective videos on its platform? So if you want to make sure you get the full picture, just subscribe to our newsletter. Go to newsletter.ntd.com and sign up. It's free.